Hello, my name is Sara Nasserzadeh. What is your name? What we name, we know. Like when we were babies, we point our finger, and then somebody names it. I add it to my collection and recollection. And we make the world as it is, and we discover the world through identifications. Our names are those identifiers for us. They are the answer to two of the most existential, fundamental questions that each of us has. Who am I? Where do I belong? At the age of 5 months old, when somebody calls your first name, you turn. Through that recognition, you exist. Oh, that is who I am. And then the second question is answered by, amongst the people who get my name in its totality. So that's where I belong. I don't know if you've heard about this phenomenon of the cocktail party effect. So basically, when you enter a very noisy room, somebody calls your name, through selective hearing, we can actually hear our own name. It's so ingrained in us, yet we didn't choose it, did we? And also, there's a good reason for that as well, that is so ingrained in us. Because when somebody calls our first name, even in the state of reduced consciousness, we respond to it because there's an immediate electrophysiological response from the brain. Did you know that? That's pretty cool. Although, again, we didn't choose this identity, did we? So through our names, we become, and we can discuss names from physiological perspective, relational perspective, different disciplines. But today, if you indulge me, I'm going to share with you my personal experiences with my name, also through the professional experiences through the past 20-something years across the world, as I traveled and explored this question with other people. As a psychosexual therapist, in the most intimate space, couples therapist, as well as relational advisor and an intercultural advisor. So, let's go. Growing up, I was proud of my name. I was empowered, I felt seen and known. My name was Sara, and I knew that I belonged because it rhymed with my sister's name, Hana and Saba. So it was a place of unity for me. Little by little, as I aged, I learned that also there's an affiliation between the name Sara in all the Abrahamic religions and high virtues, a person with high virtue. In middle school, it was the time that I learned that in Farsi, linguistically, it means pure. Imagine that as I was growing up, the colors kept coming from this side and that side, and I was having a rainbow of a name. It was so beautiful to me, the way that I experienced it, and I could introduce myself and represent myself to the world around me. Fast forward, I'm introducing myself at the first day of grad school in London. Hey, Sara Nasserzadeh, glad to be here. The person next to me, with no hesitation, said, oh, but you don't look like a Sara. I didn't honestly know what to make of it, so I made a half-baked smile because I didn't know whether I received an insult or a compliment. So I sat down, and then I was thinking in my head, okay, so identification, and this is after 20 years that I can actually digest it. At that time, I can tell you this, that I had an existential crisis. Because I was thinking, okay, so identification and recognition comes with memory. There's a connection between memory and those two. So clearly, this person had an idea as how a Sara should look like, and I didn't fit the bar, did I? I looked like the other, who couldn't possibly have an identifier with a person that was familiar to him. So I came home. For the first time ever in my life, I paused, and I thought, what's wrong with my name? Should I change it? Should I drop it? Should I modify it? If I do that, what else am I giving up? Who is him? Who is me? Who is he representing? Who am I representing? Where's the line between us? Who are them? Who are us? There's a whole thing going on inside me, as you can tell. 2 decades later, I'm still having my share of struggles with my name. Although I traveled the world, I had the privilege to work with so many different people in different settings. People call me Zara, Sierra, Sena, Saran, all the variations. And good luck with you if you have a harder name, by the way. This is an easy one. So I felt, okay, because I'm an eternal optimist, when somebody called me something, I thought maybe they have a loving cousin that is very close to them, and they call me Zara because I remind them of them, and that actually brings us closer to each other. But then the realistic side of me argued back and said, maybe actually they're trying to put you in an exotic box or somebody who is the other. So I never used to correct people because I felt like I'm going to embarrass them, I'm going to create a wedge between the two of us, or whatnot. I just didn't feel like it. But little by little, as I explored and I became more informed around the power of names that we hold, I started lovingly and firmly checking people and correcting people, because I learned that if somebody don't get your name right, you don't quite trust them. You don't quite open up to them. And I see that in the couples, in the workspaces, and at the board level as well. So all different varieties. Now, imagine that as I was going through this exploration with names and all that, I also learned that when I'm entering a space and I'm asking people about their names, some individuals, actually many people, shared with me that they had their shares of pride and shame with their names. And depending on the context that they walk in one context, they felt celebrated, they felt seen and known. And in others, they felt humiliated, dehumanized. And actually, they needed to refine and redefine their names. And I wonder if this has ever happened to you. If you are even at a coffee shop and you have to make a version of your name so they don't butcher your name, and also you actually get that coffee. So we really experienced this. Everybody has a story. And if you just Google the stories around names, there are tons that will come up as well. Now, if we go back to the experiences of people who changed their names by necessity or by choice, you will hear these stories, especially amongst the immigrant groups, sexual minority groups, especially transgenders and non-binary groups, and also racial, religious, and ethnic groups who feel humiliated or isolated beyond their own circle of people. So they shared with me that they felt when they were choosing a new name, they felt uncaged, they felt liberated, and sometimes conflicted. In one of my new workshops, a woman shared with me, well, with all of us, that her given name is Ping Yong. Every time that she introduced herself, people say, "Oh, hi, Penguin." And that is so embarrassing for her. And she can't really correct them, but what is she going to do? So she decided that I'm going to change my name to Penny. She did that. Nobody is butchering her name anymore, but the problem became whenever that she was introduced as a Penny in a circle and she was interacting with them as a Penny, she didn't feel like her totality was welcomed. She felt like, okay, so this is the facade that they are actually accepting, not my totality. So there was a degree of separation. Up to that point, I learned that names are not just identifiers, the labels that we were given, or identities, or the boundaries that we put between us and other people. But also, they could be invitations. They could be privileges. So one of my clients on the first day of our session, therapy clients, told me, "Could you please not call me Elizabeth? Because Elizabeth is my formal name, and my mother used to call me when I got into trouble. So can you please call me Lizzie, that I'm known in my friends circle with that name, and because I want to be vulnerable, I want to be open with you." And I so appreciated that. I didn't know that. So since then, I'm actually checking with people. In this relational space, how would you like me to address you? That aside, I checked with my couples, and I really invite you to think about it for a second. Like, I asked them, what nicknames do you have for each other? Usually couples have, because just to cutify each other, and also the power dynamic definition between them. So for example, people call each other hubby, wifey, lovey, June, tough guy, sweet potato, ladybug, I've heard it all, right? And they're very cute. But imagine for a second a ladybug, right, meeting a tough guy. What is that interaction in the bedroom as they're cooking breakfast together and they're appearing in a social sphere, right? So our names carry more than we think. It's about power dynamics. Now, In our individual and social circle, like a closer social circle, family circle, we are identified and recognized by our names. But also there's a whole different level to this when you go to workplaces. Because in workplaces, implicitly or explicitly, our names show our social location. You belong to this box, don't even dare to think that you're entitled to this or that. You're entitled to this or that. There are studies that show that Emily and Greg, white-sounding names, get 50% more callbacks on the same exact resume that a Lakisha or a Jamal, African-American name, sounding name, gets. Imagine that, 50% more, same resume, just different sounding names. In the past 2 decades, people come up with different coping mechanisms around these discriminatory acts and implicit and explicit biases. One of them is racial code switching. Racial code switching is that when an African-American person comes to the workplace, is specific to workplace and other places actually, and then they behave certain ways to look white, sound white, and including changing their names to a more white-sounding name so that they're more included and they're not discriminated against. And even their level of professionalism could be taken as the certain bar. Now, when I share these results, people say, goody, we have strategies now. We have coping mechanisms, we've got this. We don't actually. Because if the structural system is corrupt, is broken, and then we are coming up with coping mechanism, we're not really changing it, are we? We're just going to feed to it, right? And also research shows that if we are applying those coping mechanisms, there's more chance for us to have a burnout at workplace. Now, if you want to get in touch with your own micro-biases, microaggressions, and implicit biases around names, I have an exercise that I invite you to do whenever that you get a chance. It's called Name Me to Know Me. So if you have a bunch of people that you know, and they know each other, you can just have pieces of paper, write their names down, jumble it up, and then have them in the room, and then add other random names too, so they don't exist in the room. So you can do it with people who know each other or don't know each other, right? And then they pick a name, let's say Leslie, and then they walk to a person and say, oh, I feel like you match this name. And then the conversation begins. Why? Well, you're certain height, certain power posture, a certain gender, I think certain age. So that conversation becomes an opening for us to get to know our biases, right? When I do this exercise, actually, we laugh, we cry together, because it's so ugly to see what's inside us and if it shows up, right? And then we become more united with one another, and the level of otherness for these people that we connect with lowers. Now, the names that we carry us, and they have weights. I talk to parents whose children change their names. I talk to grandparents whose grandchildren change their names. There are elaborated naming ceremonies around the world for many actual cultures around the world, to give this name as an existential entity, that this is the legacy of our family, that we are going to put forward and announce to the world that this person is this to the world and to our community. So when the child doesn't want to keep that name out of necessity or choice, regardless of the reason, their hearts are broken. Their sorrow is immense, and it's very difficult to sit with them because you can see both sides of the table. And it takes a lot of compassion for you to be able to hold this pain with this reward for people. And people are very conflicted around their names. So what I would love for you to consider is to consider names not as labels, identifiers, identities, boundaries, but an invitation to, into me I see, connect with myself. Into me you see the privilege that I give you to get to know me. Take that. In the next opportunity that you have, I invite you to look at the person when they're introducing themselves as Jamal, as Khani, as Mary, as Michael, as Aya. and ask them about the story about their names and offer yours. Accept their invitation, offer yours. And then as you're walking from that interaction, have a check-in with yourself. How did it go? Did I feel a deeper connection with this person than any regular networking connection, that after exchanging our names at a superficial level, we just go on, oh, so what did you have for dinner? Or, I don't know, you guys, what do you do in your networking events? But it's interesting that we could move to what do you do for a living, or where do you live, right? So just spend some time around that name. And check in with yourself to see if that degree of otherness for that person goes down as you have that privilege to that knowledge about that person. I honestly believe that we can create world peace, one relationship at a time. And our names, from bedrooms to the boardrooms, could be that gateway to that journey. On that note, my name is Sara Nasserzadeh. What is yours?